They called me a joke. I called it a disguise. While the palace waited for me to wither, I was using a neighboring crown prince as my whetstone. Every step was premeditated. Every smile was a lie. I thought I had him cornered. Now the game is over, but the hunter has changed. Did I trap a prince, or did I walk straight into his jaws? I had never been a favored princess. But that didn't stop me from latching on to the neighboring crown prince. Everyone in the palace cursed me as a wolf in sheep's clothing, saying I'd shamelessly snatched an honor that should have belonged to another princess. I didn't care. A girl who'd been a laughingstock for 15 whole years. If I'd truly been that fragile, I'd have long since found some uneven bit of palace wall and bashed my head against it. Curse all you like. Until this, everyone in the palace, including me, had assumed father would casually marry me off to some minor official, and I'd spend the rest of my life in neglect and indifference. To fawn on the high and tread on the low, that's the norm, isn't it? I wasn't imagining it. The old nurse and maids who looked after me gossiped that way all the time. They never bothered to keep it from me. So if I didn't want to be trodden underfoot forever, I had to find my own way out. I didn't figure this out on my own. When I was younger, one day Consort Grace came, smiling, and asked if I wanted to go see my mother. I just visited the Empress half a month ago, I said. Not the Empress, your birth mother. My birth mother? Consort Yara, who had been thrown into the cold palace? I didn't really want to go. I had no memory of her, and I'd heard she'd gone insane. But I still nodded. Consort Grace had always been cool toward me. Now that she was being so kind, I didn't want to rebuff her goodwill. When the door of the cold palace opened, I saw Consort Grace wrinkle her nose in distaste. In the next instant, that disgust was replaced, quite openly, by smug delight. Because that wretched woman turned around and fixed us with dead fish eyes, then let out a weird, heh sort of laugh. I was honestly terrified and wanted to turn and leave at once. But without warning, 2 hands shoved me forward. Then the door slammed shut. Only she and I were left. And then came the scene I would remember all my life. Her eyes cleared in an instant, and her expression softened. "Come here," she said, crooking a finger at me. I was still terribly afraid, but my feet wouldn't obey me. They moved on their own. "You've grown. You look more and more like me." The corners of her lips slowly lifted. Only then did I truly see her face. Even fallen as she was, she still had a lingering charm. No wonder she'd once outshone all 6 palaces. I trembled and didn't dare speak. "Alas, being like me is no good," she murmured. I knew what she meant. One reason father shunned me, people said, was that I resembled her, and the sight of me displeased him. "You haven't had an easy time, have you?" She smoothed my hair. "It's a pity. I suffered so much to bring you into this world, yet I've never once heard you call me Mother Consort. Heaven can be my witness. I hadn't meant to be so cold." My throat felt blocked by something. No matter how I tried, I couldn't force out a sound. There was a glint of disappointment in her eyes, but her voice grew more fervent. "Child, remember this. You must climb up. Only then can you really live. Be good." She was so gentle that I couldn't help leaning closer. The next moment, she lifted her hand and raked her sharp nails hard across my neck. I don't know if I bled, but the pain made me howl. "Mother Consort." The attendants outside rushed in at the sound and dragged her away. She thrashed and screamed, kicking and hitting, utterly unlike the woman of just a moment before. Consort Grace watched my tears, gloating. I wonder how that madwoman will feel if she ever comes to her senses and learns she even struck her own daughter? In that instant, I understood many things. For example, she had to be mad to save herself and to save me. And for example, that one phrase, "climb up." So when I heard the crown prince of the Surya kingdom would personally come to the Chiwan imperial palace on a diplomatic visit, I knew my chance had arrived. Everyone knew this was also the perfect time for a marriage alliance. But I had 3 older sisters ahead of me, talented, beautiful, and beloved by father. By all reason, the position of Surya crown princess should go to one of them. I could only fight for it myself. Yet I couldn't even attend the welcome banquet. They said there wasn't enough space in the main hall, so they didn't give me a place. Who knew if that was true? That night, I stood alone on a corner tower, far away, watching the palace lanterns in the great hall light up one by one. From within drifted the faint sound of zithers and flutes, and long, drawn-out songs. When the lingering music rose, I knew my sisters were dancing. I knew no one could see me, but I still couldn't help beginning to dance on my own. Spinning in the pale moonlight, I turned and met a pair of eyes. They made me think of moonlight pouring silver over the ground. But it wasn't the time to be dazed. I looked at the tall, aristocratic man before me, wearing a crown of vinework and a white robe embroidered with gold. I was certain he was the Surya Crown Prince. All the Chiwan lords and marquises who had the right to be here tonight. I'd seen them all. He couldn't be one of them. "What a beauty beneath the moon," he said, his voice like water splashing against jade. The tips of my ears reddened, but I kept my composure. "I am Princess Emily. Isn't this rather rude of you?" I wasn't putting on airs. I just needed an excuse to state my name. He strolled toward me. Only then did I see his face clearly, and to my annoyance, I stared for a heartbeat. Even without the halo of Crown Prince of Surya, he was still strikingly handsome. Refined features but not effeminate. He flicked open his paper fan with lazy ease. "Princess Emily," he said. I was still trying to think how to leave a deeper impression on him when I suddenly heard, in a very serious tone, "A beauty is a rare thing. Why don't you become my crown princess?" I was stunned. The casualness of it was beyond anything I'd imagined. Had my dancing really been that good? Only much later did I learn that, at that time, he simply found it convenient to play along with me. In a way, we were perfectly matched. But that's getting ahead of things. I deliberately let my face fall and stared into his deep eyes, searching for the slightest sign of mockery. There was none. He didn't seem to be joking. I had my agenda, but what was his? Was he after my lack of favor? My pitifulness? If Emperor Adrian of Surya knew his crown prince chose a consort so carelessly, would he cough blood and rage? "Princess Emily," he called softly again. "You may be Crown Prince Edward," I said, my heart secretly wavering, "but this is still the Chiwan Imperial Palace. Is it fun to toy with me?" Even my attempt at reproach lacked conviction. At some point, Edward had stepped into a patch of shadow where even the moonlight couldn't reach. I couldn't see his expression, only that he was looking at me. My heart thudded. I was afraid he'd shove me right off the tower in a fit of anger. It was pitch black down there. There might not even be a third witness. And even if there was, would father really stand up for his least favored daughter? I glanced down at the darkness below and suddenly regretted coming here. A chill wind swept past. I shivered and finally came back to my senses. Suddenly, something colder landed in my hand. A jade pendant. "Take this as proof. I am not toying with you," Edward said, his voice carried on the wind. When I looked up, he was already walking away. I'd thought I was the one scheming against him, yet he'd made the first move and left me bewildered. The palace was full of beauties. I would never be arrogant enough to believe he coveted my looks. Something so out of the ordinary had to mean trouble. But what did I have to fear? What did I have left to lose? As I left the tower, I tied the jade to my belt. "Edward Mew, you'd better keep your word." The moon was bright that night, the window bright as day. I tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep. I was waiting for the imperial edict. But I stayed awake until my eyes couldn't endure it, and I finally dozed off. No word came from the main hall. The next day, as I ate grapes in the courtyard, I overheard the cleaning maids gossiping. I heard the emperor wanted to marry Princess Hannah over last night, but the crown prince of Surya refused. Really? Then maybe he has his eye on Princess Claire. What's there to envy? If you marry over, you're far from your homeland. So what? She'll be empress one day. The grapes in my hand suddenly didn't taste sweet anymore. The crown prince of Surya certainly knew how to keep a girl hanging. Near midday, a very rare guest came to my usually deserted palace. Consort Julia Mu, the Surya emperor's own sister. I'd heard she kept to herself and rarely visited the other palaces, and that I had even less to do with her. I had not expected her to come, nor that she would smile so warmly at me, with none of the chill she was rumored to have. Even more unexpected, she personally drew my brows and painted my lips. Such intimacy made me uneasy. I instinctively shrank back. "Consort Julia, what is the meaning of this?" "You'll have to change how you address me soon." My heart lurched. I suddenly remembered she was not just Consort Julia, but Edward's aunt. "My lady, what are you planning? Let's make you beautiful. I'll take you to the tea banquet tonight." He was serious. Once Consort Julia showed a satisfied smile, I saw a woman in the mirror with red lips, jade-like skin, and a head full of swaying jewels that clinked softly as she moved. When night fell, she brought me to a corner seat in the main hall. It was clearly a place she'd arranged at the last minute. I didn't speak to anyone. I only held the warm, jade pendant tightly in my palm. Once everyone was seated, I saw him at the front of the hall, bearing himself with impeccable dignity. When Edward presented the formal proposal of marriage, the hall erupted in uproar. I was too far away to see Father's face. I only heard him speak after a long pause. "Princess Emily is still young. I fear she is not suited to marry far away to the Surya kingdom." Watching Edward solemnly explain how he had fallen in love with me at first sight, I couldn't help but laugh. Those beside me thought I was simply too happy, but I was truly amused. In the moonlight last night, I had clearly seen how hazy and indifferent his eyes were. But so what? We each needed something from the other. "Summon Princess Emily," Father said. "She's here," Edward replied. He turned and looked straight at me, unerringly picking me out. I nearly didn't have time to wipe away my smile. When I came to stand beside Edward, I saw his gaze pause briefly at my waist. As I looked up, I caught Father's expression freeze. Perhaps he simply hadn't seen me in a long time. Or perhaps I looked more and more like Mother Consort Yara. I knew it was time to play my role, so I put on my most pitiful, fragile expression. "Father, can you see? These years have not been kind to me." Edward spoke again. "The jade pendant at Princess Emily's waist is my personal token. Since our hearts already belong to each other, I beg you to grant your blessing. This is also a chance for our two nations to join in marriage." When Father still wavered, Consort Julia stepped forward to support her nephew, as I had expected. In the end, he agreed, though clearly reluctant. As I walked back to my seat, the stairs in the hall nearly pierced me through. I sat down and met one gaze that held me fast. Prince Lucas Lai, my third imperial brother. The only person in this palace who had ever shown me any real kindness. He cared deeply for family. When we were younger, I once brought him leftover pastries when Father had punished him to kneel. After that, he always quietly watched over me. While people went up one by one to offer formal congratulations, I, the protagonist of the night, slipped out unnoticed. Sure enough, before long, a cool voice sounded behind me. "Emily, are you serious? This jade pendant didn't jump onto me by itself, did it?" I smiled. "He spoke about you so deeply, yet he's only been here a day. Doesn't it sound false?" Lucas's tone was harsh. "Brother, what are you so afraid of? If he tricks you into going over there, the sky will be high and the mountains far. If you suffer indignities, you'll have no one to complain to." How is that different from now? My eyes stung. It was the only time that night I spoke from the heart. Lucas fell silent for a moment. "The sons of the Minister of Rights, the commander of the capital garrison, and Censor Liu are all of age. If you wed one of them, my Prince Sumanor can look after you a little." "Lucas," I said seriously, "I want to marry to the Surya kingdom." There was one more thing I didn't say. If, someday, even you no longer care about me, I'll be trampled into the dust again. Lucas sighed. Only after a long time did he say, "If Father refuses to hold a grand wedding, Prince Sumanor will prepare a dowry for you thick enough to make up for it. You still have to marry someday, you know." He didn't answer. He just walked away. A flicker of motion startled me. Someone was behind the rockery. Seeing the hem of a robe slip out, I relaxed. "Do you enjoy eavesdropping?" Edward walked out in perfect composure. I came out to clear my head and happened to witness this touching display of sibling affection. It didn't feel right to interrupt. Who knew how much he'd heard? "You kept the jade," he said, eyes resting on it as a faint smile curved his lips. "Because I'm smitten with you, of course." I put on a shy look. "Let's see who can act better." "Is that so?" His gaze cooled as he watched me. "Last night you seemed to think I was slighting you." "You." I deliberately let panic slip into my voice, acting like a girl who couldn't handle flirtation, and hurried away. Only when I was far off did I breathe again. I still didn't know him, and acting natural around him would be a problem for some time. When I returned to my palace, I saw a richly dressed figure standing in the moonlight. "Sister Claire?" I greeted calmly. Princess Claire turned, looking at me with a cold face. I thought she would scold me for stealing what was hers. Instead, she didn't bother to speak at all. She simply lifted her hand and slapped me. The cold wind made my cheeks sting. Are you insane? I stepped back. Surprise flickered across Claire's beautiful eyes. She hadn't expected the quiet one to be this rude. You haven't even left the Chuan Imperial Palace, and you already dare treat your elders with disrespect? I'm teaching you a lesson. Don't you want it? Claire smiled faintly. It's not that I don't want it, I just think your lesson isn't quite enough. If you hit me a bit harder, I can show off the marks in front of Father and the Crown Prince, and maybe earn some pity. My words were insolent, but my face remained innocently mild. I was tired. If only she'd leave. You. She was angry, but quickly calmed and sneered. I'll tell Father that Emily has always preferred to keep a low profile. If the marriage procession is too ostentatious, it will only make you uncomfortable. Trying to cut into my dowry? But that would be more a slap to Edward's face than mine. Not my problem. Besides, I still had the dowry from Prince Manor. By the way, you said you were teaching me. Teaching me what? I shifted the topic. You skipped the welcome banquet and still managed to ensnare the Surya Crown Prince. If that's not breaking the rules, what is? I'd like to ask Crown Prince Edward that myself. When I find out, I'll be sure to write and tell you, sister. Claire's face darkened completely. The words I'd exchanged with Princess Claire that day were more than I'd spoken to her in 2 months. Except for Lucas. None of my royal siblings liked dealing with me. Father didn't need to say a word. They all took their cues from him. I gave a small curtsy and brushed past Claire. Today, I'd pretty much let my real self show. The moon was especially bright that night, the window bright as day. I lay awake for a long time. I began seriously thinking about what my life would be like after I married over. People in Surya would probably learn I'd been ignored in Chiwan, but at least I'd have the title of Crown Princess. Still, it would all depend on Edward. If he didn't at least appear to favor me in public, my life there might be worse than it was as Princess Emily. It was a headache. The next morning, I woke to find it had snowed during the night, the first snow. The world was almost entirely white, only the red walls and yellow tiles standing out. A maid came to say Father wanted to see me. I was actually pleased, not because he wanted to see me, but because I loved walking in snow. I liked the soft crunch of my boots in it. When I entered the hall, I brought in a gust of cold air that made Father cough several times. I felt nothing for him, really, but I noticed the corners of his eyes were red. Do people like to weave illusions for themselves when they grow old? Why pretend to be affectionate? Emily, come closer, Father beckoned. About the wedding preparations, how do you feel? Are you truly unwilling for it to be grand? So Claire had already gone to him. I dare not trouble Father. As things were before, so let them be now. In that case, we'll follow the precedent of the Princess Natalie. Princess Natalie? Oh yes, my aunt, who had also married to Surya. Is there anything else, Father? I was a little surprised at how bluntly the question slipped out. When you leave, Eunuch Lee will give you a letter. Deliver it, unopened, to Princess Natalie. Yes, you may go. After all that fuss, the day of Edward's departure arrived, also the day I was to leave the palace with him. I put on my ceremonial gown and the 4 phoenix crown. The drooping jewels were terribly heavy. Edward wore white fox fur, looking gentle and harmless. He stood by the carriage, smiling as he waited. Seeing me approach, he extended his hand to help me up. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Lucas roll his eyes. As the wedding procession approached the city gate, I debated whether to lift the curtain and take a last, sentimental look, lest I seem too cold. But when I glanced at Edward, he had his eyes closed, resting, not looking at me at all. Come over here, Edward suddenly said, patting the seat beside him. Sitting side by side was fine. I was still nervous when looking at his face. Is my crown princess very nervous? Edward smiled faintly. The title made me tense up, but I forced myself to stay calm. How could I not admire your heroic bearing? We're husband and wife now, no need to speak so formally. How could I not? As long as you stand above me, I will never truly dare be casual. Where's the jade pendant I gave you? He asked when I didn't answer. Because it's from you. I have to keep it safe. I'd be heartbroken if it chipped. Then I'll give you another." His voice held a hint of laughter. I smiled too, then closed my eyes. I wasn't sleepy. I just didn't want to keep sparring with him. It was exhausting. At the posting stations along the way, we ran into small fires and bandit attacks. Nothing worth mentioning. I trusted the Crown Prince's guards. We didn't suffer a scratch. Until we crossed into Syria. There, Edward was ambushed. It was almost funny. He'd strutted around Chiwan for so long without trouble, and the moment he returned home, his own people came for him. I was timid. When the fighting started outside the carriage, I covered my ears. The clash of blades and shouts grew distant, unreal. But Edward's composure reassured me somewhat. Unfortunately, letting down your guard by habit is never wise. A long sword suddenly tore through the curtain and struck straight toward Edward. I turned and took the blow for him. Blood gushed. My eyelids grew heavy, my body soft. In the haze, I caught a glimpse of stunned disbelief in Edward's eyes. If I'd had the strength, I would have laughed. This would be my bargaining chip for favor. I was sure he'd save me, otherwise he'd lose too much face. When I woke, the first thing I saw was the slow sway of layered bed curtains. I coughed once. A waiting maid rushed over, kneeling to offer water. "I will immediately send word to the Crown Prince." I tried to sit up. Pain stabbed my wound, and the maid hurried to support me. "How many days have I slept?" "3 days." "Has the Crown Prince visited me?" The Crown Prince fell behind on many state affairs while visiting Chiwan. Since returning, he has been shut in his study to work. My head spun. I was rubbing my temples when I heard Edward's voice. "Luna, you may go." The maid who'd been serving me gave a bow and withdrew. "If you feel unwell or want something to eat or look at, tell Luna." "I understand. Why did you block that sword for me?" So he did ask. I was weak, but I still caught his sleeve, looking as pitiful as possible. "If anything had happened to you, I could hardly have borne the blame." He was silent for a while. "I will treat you well. I don't care what you feel in your heart. I only ask that before others, you never belittle me, so they won't dare look down on me." Edward suddenly laughed. His gaze made my heart quail. A faint scent of sandalwood swept over me. When I came back to myself, he was already holding me. "Crown Princess, your words are unpleasant to my ears." "Why only before others?" His male scent was unfamiliar and disconcerting, but I couldn't push him away. "So long as you are pleased." After some time in his arms, I drifted to sleep again. When I woke, he was gone. I asked to be taken to pay respects to the Empress. She was also my aunt, Princess Natalie of Chiwan, now Empress of Syria. Empress Natalie was as beautiful and graceful as ever, yet at first glance she reminded me of petals falling in a storm, exquisitely delicate, a little frail. She had no children and could bear none. Perhaps because of that, her eyes always seemed lonely. "Our Emily is here," she said. "Emily greets Empress Natalie," I corrected myself, using her Surya title. "Rise," she said, motioning me closer. "Edward's thoughts run deep, yet he fell for you at first sight. It's fate between you." "I have many things I wish to tell Aunt." I gave her a look, hinting for her to dismiss the servants. A flicker of confusion passed through her eyes, but she said calmly, "Leave us. I wish to speak with Emily alone." I handed her father's letter. After reading it, she tossed it into the incense burner without changing expression, then spoke to me in a low voice for a long time. Her words went on and on. I could hardly remember them all. As I was leaving, she called me back. "When you are officially installed, come see me often, will you?" I agreed, but a sudden unease rose in my heart. I went to Edward's study and asked if I could leave the Crown Prince's palace. "I have pressing matters. I can't accompany you." "I never said you had to come," I replied. He looked at me, something unreadable in his gaze. I quickly changed my tone. "If you can come, that would be best. I just don't wish to disturb you if you're busy." "Where do you want to go?" "I heard there are many Chiwan merchants in the Surya capital, selling all sorts of things. I'd like to look. I'll send people to buy them for you. Aunt said once I'm properly installed, it'll be harder to go out than now." I softened my voice. Edward didn't answer right away. He simply ground ink, the stick moving slowly in the stone. "I'll help you," he said at last, letting me take his hand. I ground ink for him as I coaxed him. At last he nodded. I exhaled in relief. He really was hard to move. Once I was in the carriage, the guards respectfully taught me how to use the hidden mechanisms if we were attacked. The location felt very familiar. Wasn't that exactly where Edward had been sitting on our way home from Chiwan? I asked casually. Are mechanisms like this common on carriages? Yes. And the Crown Prince's carriage also has them? The Crown Prince is precious. Naturally, his carriage is extremely well fortified. I fell silent. If the defenses were that good, how had that sword pierced the curtain so easily? And why had Edward made no move to trigger the mechanism? What was he thinking? Since I couldn't figure it out, I stopped trying. There was something more urgent for me right now. Aunt had told me I must do everything in my power to bear the heir as a legitimate son. By custom, that should have been impossible. Yet in his letter, Father had asked Aunt to help me. What were they all plotting? I lifted the curtain and let the scenes of the Surya capital roll by. I'd already calculated the time. A little way from my real destination, I asked to stop. I bought some silk and pastries from Chiwan stalls, enough to make my later movements seem natural. At the counter of a medical hall, a delicate young man was tidying up. Before he could greet me, I said, "Where is your physician?" "I am Ethan Liang, the physician here. I want 1 tail of astragalus, 2 of angelica, 3 of loquat, 2 of monkshood, 3 of kudzu root, and 1 of cassia seeds." He stayed perfectly calm. "We're out of kudzu root. You still have some." Only then did he smile faintly. Ethan Liang greets Princess Emily. As a spy, isn't running a medical hall a bit conspicuous? I lowered my voice. "It's only for convenience in meeting you." "Can you become a physician in the Crown Prince's palace?" "That would take some maneuvering. As long as it doesn't cost me my life, use any means you like." He blinked, then smiled. "Very well." When I got back, I was already running a fever. It would recede, then return over and over. I vaguely heard imperial physicians coming and going, and Edward shouting at them. But my eyelids were lidden. I couldn't open them. Sometimes they propped me up and forced bitter medicine into my mouth. When I slumped in the person's arms, I kept smelling that familiar sandalwood scent. "So Edward, you dare pour medicine down my throat? Fine. I can't do anything to you anyway." I don't know how long I drifted like that, but eventually my eyes opened. The first thing I saw was Ethan Liang. He showed no surprise, only said calmly, "The Crown Princess was struck by a strange illness. The palace physicians were helpless, so the Crown Prince issued a notice to the commoners. That is how I came." I stared at him for a moment. "When did you poison me?" "The poison is hard to cure, but won't damage your foundations," he replied, not a trace of guilt in his bright eyes. What a helper Aunt had found me. "So now? The Crown Prince has allowed me to remain in the Crown Prince's palace," Ethan said, closing his medical case. "From now on, I will care for your health." I looked around. "Why are you the only one here?" "I roughly guessed when you'd wake and sent the others to boil medicine." "So young, and already such skill. Thank you for the praise. I should go report to the Crown Prince." When Edward came, the maids who had gone to boil medicine returned as well. He insisted on feeding me spoon by spoon. The maids pretended to admire the ceiling and the floor. Many times, I wanted to say I remembered him forcing medicine into me while I slept, but every time I opened my mouth, another spoonful came to my lips. "What are you thinking about so intently?" Edward blew gently on the steaming medicine. "You dazzled me," I said softly. "It is easy to lose yourself when your husband is gentle and handsome," he replied with a smile. "Fine, whatever you say." "The physician who saw me just now looked unfamiliar," I asked deliberately. "He's from outside the palace. The ones in the imperial infirmary are useless." At night, he sometimes carried me into the courtyard to look at the moon, drawing a chorus of stares from the palace staff. I tried to get down. "The ground is cold," he said, refusing to set me down. After a few nights of moon-gazing, the investiture ceremony arrived. The elaborate procession, the long line of crimson finery, the grand spectacle. It all left me dazed. I went through the motions like a puppet on strings. Only when a jade rui lifted the red veil from my face did I truly return to myself. I didn't dare meet Edward's warm gaze. I lowered my lashes and stared at the gold threads on his robe. He naturally brought out the nuptial wine, and we drank together. I was unusually quiet that night. He talked more than usual, then stopped and let his restless hands slide from my collar to my sash, and finally, he pressed me beneath him. Moonlight pooled like water. Some had no time to admire it. Some felt like they were falling through clouds. By the time I woke the next day, the pillow beside me was empty. A maid brought a bowl of inky black medicine and respectfully asked me to drink it. "What is this?" "A tonic." I took it and asked, as if casually, "Prescribed by physician Liang?" "This is an old recipe boiled by the nanny." Oh, Ethan Liang wasn't allowed to handle this. When he came later to take my pulse, I asked him outright. "Everyone understands what this medicine is, but it's not something you mention openly. They don't fully trust me yet, which is why they haven't handed it over," he said lightly. "Don't worry. Just weigh your moves carefully." He lowered his voice. "The Chiwan Empire hasn't been peaceful lately. Why? A struggle for the heir's seat." I understood enough. Sure enough, less than half a month later, news arrived. My third brother, Lucas Lee, had replaced our fourth brother as heir and become Crown Prince Lucas. I wasn't surprised. His given name, Lucas, had always shown father's high hopes. It was only 3 years ago that our fourth brother framed him and cost him the position. That he had seized it back now was completely expected. The news put me in very good spirits. I drank 2 small cups of wine that night. When I was pleasantly tipsy, my maid brought sobering soup. One of the maids sent word to Physician Liang. "He sent this sour soup, but it's already night and it's not proper for him to enter," she said, eyes lowered. After drinking the soup, drowsiness rolled over me. My eyelids drooped, but I didn't want to lie down yet. "The Crown Prince is unlikely to come at this hour. You'd better rest." "You misunderstand. I'm not waiting for him." I nodded but stayed slumped at the small table. "Assassin!" He went that way quickly. The sudden shouting jolted me awake. My maid hurried me into the inner hall. "Please don't be afraid, the guards will handle it. I'll stand watch outside." She had barely gone when someone crashed through the window. My heart lurched. I was about to scream, but when I saw his face, the cry died in my throat. Ethan Liang, dressed in black, his face pale, sweat beading on his forehead. A dark patch of blood stained his waist. I didn't have to ask to know what he'd been up to. "You're insane," I scolded, but still went to help him. "If they find me, I'll seize you as a hostage. You won't be implicated," he said urgently. "I know you want to earn merit for Chiwan, but this is the Surya Crown Prince's palace. You're being too hasty." I kept my voice low. I had no intention of killing the Crown Prince. I only wanted to search his study. "Who cares what your intention was?" I cut him off. He froze. "Shh." I stopped him from saying more and turned, listening hard. Footsteps drew near. "Get under the bed, now." But the metallic tang of blood still lingered. I dumped half a box of ash into the incense burner. It helped a little, but not enough. A sharp crack sounded as I crushed a porcelain cup. I stepped on the shards. When I curled on the floor, gasping in pain, the door flew open. "Emily." Edward strode in and scooped me onto a stool. Without bothering to hide his distress, he took my bleeding foot in his hand. "Summon the physicians. Why are you just standing there?" "No, don't wait for them." "It hurts so much," I sobbed. I wasn't faking it this time. It really did hurt. Edward forced himself to calm. "Bring a medicine chest from the nearest room." As he bandaged my foot himself, I stared at the bright torches outside. "Has something happened?" "There was an assassin. He got away. I was worried you might be in danger." "I'm fine." His brows drew together. "All the maids on duty tonight will be punished." "It was my fault. I was frightened and sent them away." He let it drop. I thought he'd leave, but instead he lifted me onto the bed. My heart pounded. There was someone under it, after all. Luckily, he didn't do much beyond letting his hands wander. "You're very tense," he said, feeling me tremble. "The noise outside scares me." Since there had been trouble in the Crown Prince's palace, he couldn't stay all night. I steadied my breathing, making it slow and even. As expected, he thought I'd fallen asleep. Within half an hour, I heard him rise and leave. When everything outside had gone quiet, I dragged Ethan Liang out. His skin was pale to begin with. Without blood in his face, he looked truly frightening. At least he hadn't fainted. A deep bite mark stood out on his hand. "You." I couldn't cry out. His voice was weak. I poured water for him. "You were reckless. It was my fault. Once inside the Crown Prince's palace, I grew complacent. It won't happen again. I was only afraid I'd drag you down with me." I shook my head. "With the palace on high alert tonight, how will you leave?" The guards know I've been bringing medicine to you. I only need to wait a bit, then change clothes and walk out. Seeing I said nothing, he went on. I won't die. That night, I was on edge, fearing he'd be caught. Thankfully, I was worrying too much. The Crown Prince's palace was no stranger to trouble. The failure to catch the assassin was soon forgotten. After my brother Lucas became Crown Prince, he began openly showering the Surya Crown Prince's palace with gifts. Soon everyone knew the Chiyuan Crown Prince favored his little sister. One day, as I ate fresh fruit he'd sent over, rare for the season, Ethan Liang came in. I watched his face carefully. He seemed to understand. Don't worry, a physician can treat himself. No one can see my old wounds now. Ethan, I plan to write to my brother. Do you have anything to send back? His eyes lit up. As it happens, I do. From what you found that night in Edward's study, he lowered his head. I'll use cipher. Even if Surya intercepts it, they'll gain nothing. I sighed. Just be cautious. By the way, I said, grabbing a handful of fruit, these came fresh from Chiyuan. He shook his head quickly. These were transported from Chiyuan by Crown Prince himself. They're far too precious for me. You've been away from Chiyuan for years. You haven't tasted these in so long, have you? I saw his eyes turn red. If I say eat, you eat. I allowed myself a small show of authority. He took one carefully, wiped it with his sleeve, and slowly put it in his mouth. Crown Princess, if you write to the new Crown Prince, he'll be very happy, he said, managing a smile. I want to tell him not to be so ostentatious. His position isn't that secure yet. Ethan shook his head. The new Crown Prince is supported by public sentiment. His foundation is firm. A little display like this won't matter. I eyed him skeptically. Everyone knows the Chiyuan Crown Prince is flaunting his strength for the sake of his distant sister. Who would really censure it openly? Just as he finished, a pair of white boots with gold trim appeared in my line of sight. Ethan saw my eyes shift and quickly stepped back to kneel. I greet the Crown Prince. Edward gave him a glance, his eyes unreadable. Before he could speak, I gestured for Ethan to withdraw. After Edward came in, he didn't sit down. Instead, he leaned over the incense burner and took a faint sniff. Why is the incense so light lately? My heart jumped as I remembered the half-box of ash I'd poured in that night. I grew tired of pear blossom scent, I said evenly. Is that so? He gave me a lazy look. I'll have the household office send a new one. Thank you. How's your health? Before I could answer, he went on. There are more senior physicians in the Imperial Infirmary, perhaps we should. Ethan Liang is young. The physicians there already treat him poorly. If you take him away from me now, where will that leave him? You're quite protective of him. I'm protecting someone who's helped me. He smiled. You know, you've helped me too. What if I have my own motives? I asked lightly. His long fingers lightly traced the back of my hand, and if I know that, it's still hard to repay a beauty's kindness. I changed the subject. You're not busy today? I sent the memorials over. I'll stay with you tonight. That night, as we lay together, he spoke against my neck, his breath warm. Celine and the Empress Dowager Margaret will be coming back from the National Temple. It took me a moment to place the name. Of course, Princess Celine, the most favored, most exalted princess in Surya. She had been at the National Temple with Empress Dowager Margaret for the past year, which was why I hadn't seen her. Why tell me this especially? Our Celine, if she marries, must be the most honored bride in the world. My fingers almost dug into his shoulders. You want her to marry my brother? If Emperor Lucas were not destined to ascend the throne, I wouldn't be pleased at all, he said. I kicked him away. Lucas is truly unparalleled. You're not allowed to slight him. He didn't get angry. Usually you're like a tame kitten. Touch one whisker and out come the claws. He nipped my ear, but I like it. His teasing sent a shiver through me, but my mind was clear. I was thinking of Celine and my brother. I suddenly wanted to meet her. When Ethan returned, he told me the Crown Prince intercepted our letter. I expected him to read it, but... Don't worry, he let it go through. Emperor Lucas will receive it, Ethan said with a smile. Besides, I prepared 2 copies. I bit into a slice of yam cake. What exactly did you find that night? Emperor Lucas would scold me if he knew I dragged you into this, Ethan replied. You don't trust me. For once, a flicker of panic crossed his usually calm eyes. Of course I do. After a moment's hesitation, He leaned closer and whispered, "It seems the Crown Prince has ambitions of encroachment." Of course, that's only my guess. The final judgment is for Emperor Lucas. Yet Emperor Adrian has been sincere in his dealings with Chiwan in recent years. Emperor Adrian, yes. The Crown Prince, perhaps not. You mean if Edward Mu ascends the throne, things could change? I lowered my voice. Ethan's expression dimmed. Please, don't ask. The more I say, the more Lucas will scold me later. And you are now Suria's future empress. You cannot get involved. I have no such ability, I said, brushing crumbs from my skirt. He offered a handkerchief. Don't worry too much. Emperor Lucas will come soon. I brightened. Truly? He should be setting out, just a little longer now. Have you met Princess Celine in Suria? I haven't. I've only heard she's a rare beauty. I was terribly curious. It's time for your medicine, he reminded me. At my request, he'd been adjusting my prescriptions, leaving me visibly weaker than I truly was. It made it more natural for him to stay by my side to attend to me. Others thought it was the lingering effect of the sword wound, plus the climate, and didn't suspect much. It's so bitter. I added half a tael of Jiaying plum. Oh. I hadn't expected to meet Celine the way I did. I heard that as soon as she returned, she went to the Crown Prince's palace. Edward didn't summon me, but I wanted to see her, so I left my hall, crossed the courtyard, and walked toward the main hall. Birdsong and wind whispered around the rockeries. Amid the sound, I caught something out of place. Following it, I saw them behind the rocks. A beautiful girl's delicate hand rested on Edward's arm. Ed, is it only because she's a princess? She's just a princess after all. Charlotte, Edward's tone was lazy. She's the crown princess. Don't speak ill of her behind her back. So what if I do? I've never stopped loving you, not for a single moment all these years. Yet she can marry in so easily just because of her title. How can I accept that? I was quietly enjoying the show when a slender white hand suddenly covered my mouth, stopping me from making a sound. Holding me like that, she drew me away. Only when we had gone a fair distance did she let go. When I turned, the richly dressed woman before me was staring straight at me, cold as a crescent moon behind clouds. For some reason I blurted, "Celine." I worked hard to get Charlotte in there. "Don't you dare interrupt them," she said. "You see me as the outsider?" I heard the meaning in her words. "You're overthinking it, Crown Princess. I just don't like you. But my brother dotes on you, so there's nothing I can do." She was so blunt that I found myself liking her a little. Seeing me smile for no reason, she frowned slightly. "Do you always present such a flawless face to everyone?" "When I see the Crown Prince, I'll just cry, make a scene, and threaten to hang myself," I said. Celine's mouth curved in a faint sneer. "Now I don't want Charlotte to marry in at all. Her mind is nowhere near as sharp as yours." "Your hostility toward me seems rather sudden," I said softly. "I hear you sat on the cold bench in the Chiwan Palace for years. Then you found my brother, a towering tree. Weren't you eager to climb up?" Her voice was calm, but her words were sharp as needles. I immediately stopped liking her bluntness. She'd laid my thoughts bare. How embarrassing. I began to worry whether such a personality would clash with my brother. Another headache. I hadn't been back in Radiant Hall long before Edward dragged me to his study. He had me read memorials out loud. It made little sense, but I did as told. Just when I was getting sleepier, he suddenly asked, smiling, "You saw it all, didn't you?" My drowsiness vanished. Did he have eyes in the back of his head? "Will you take a concubine?" I asked. "We're newlyweds and in perfect harmony, aren't we?" he answered blandly. I nodded, rubbing my eyes. "I'm going to rest." He pulled me into his arms. "Sleep now or you'll be up all night." As if I didn't know who kept me up. He called for a board and stones and made me sit opposite him. Before long, he was nearly out of moves. "If you place that stone, you'll certainly lose," I told him. He looked up at me, eyes deep. "I played the first move wrong. One wrong move and the whole game is lost." "What a pity," I replied, then lifted a few stones from the board. "You can take it back." Instead, he swept the board, scattering the pieces, and laughed. "No more. It's boring. You're shameless." He only smiled, neither admitting nor denying it. Even before Emperor Lucas arrived at the Surya capital, his gifts had already filled the East Palace storerooms. One day I summoned Ethan Lang and rewarded him with many things. When he saw items from Chiwan, his eyes lit, then dimmed. "Thank you for your generosity, but I must decline." I wasn't asking. Now that I've entered Syria, I shouldn't cling to the past. He had a point. Seeing my boredom, he hesitated, then said gently, "Have you prepared anything for Emperor Lucas?" "I haven't thought of anything. The plums in Plumview Garden are at their best. Why not use what's at hand? I've heard plum blossoms can be used in wine and pastries. Plum wine is sweet and light. Plum soup cakes whet the appetite. It's the thought that counts, not the cost." He made it sound so tempting that I suddenly craved some myself. I ran to Plumview Garden. As I picked blossoms, I heard the crunch of footsteps in the snow. A fur cloak settled over my shoulders from behind. "Is Syria so poor they can't give you a proper coat?" The cold voice came from behind. I didn't need to turn to know who it was. "Brother," I said. "Ethan Liang brought you here?" he asked, not bothering to deny it. "Thought I'd see you before going to deal with them." The wind tugged at his dark robe. He straightened my white cloak. Warmth softened his usually cool brows. "At last your hem doesn't drag on the ground." I blinked, then laughed. Back in Chiwan, the household office always watched the winds and slighted me. They rationed charcoal, stoves, and thick clothes more strictly for me than for others. Sometimes the maids even stole what little I had. One winter, I'd been walking down a palace path in thin clothes when I ran into Lucas. Just like today, he'd draped his robe over me. Back then, he'd been much taller, and his clothes had trailed behind me like a broom sweeping snow. "I've grown and gained weight," I said, turning in a circle. He lowered his gaze to me. "Don't dodge the question. How does Edward treat you?" "Well, I'm the only lady in the Crown Prince's palace right now. He hasn't neglected me. It's good. By the way, does he know you're here?" Lucas's eyes held a faint disdain. "I can't be bothered to play polite with him." "You don't like him?" "He's like a fox. I don't trust him." "Have you heard of Princess Celine? Father told me she'll be my crown princess." "You don't look happy." "Whoever I marry, it's all the same," he said quietly. "She's a great beauty. The palace is full of them." He suddenly remembered something. "I'm going to leave a capable maid at your side." "Isn't Ethan Liang already here to look after me?" He shook his head. "He's a man. A maid can serve more closely." I thought for a moment. "You could take Ethan back to Chiwan." "Oh? He's young and impulsive. Better send him home. Besides, didn't you say he could be replaced?" Lucas stared at me in silence. "Fine," I said. "I just thought he must miss home." This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment kindness. The thought had long been buried in my heart. "In the palace, soft-heartedness is a knife at your throat," Lucas said. Knowing he rarely changed his mind, I only nodded. But he added, lowering his lashes, "If you truly want him to go, I'll agree. Thank you on his behalf." Lucas gazed up at the sky above the palace walls. "And you? Do you want to come back?" "How you joke these days, brother. I'm married to Surya. I'm not here as a guest." "Take it as a joke, then." My eyes drifted. I saw Edward standing atop a corner tower, looking toward Plumview Garden. Lucas seemed to see him too. He took my wrist. "Come on, let's meet my brother-in-law." As dusk faded, palace lanterns bloomed across the sky. At the banquet, songs filled the hall and wine flowed. "You're not even this close to me," Edward said, sipping a clear wine. I wanted to step on his new boots. "He's my brother. I'm your husband. I'm only afraid if I cling to you too much I'll annoy you," I murmured, lowering my head. He hooked a finger under one of my hairpins. The tiny ornaments chimed delicately. His voice followed. "I've given you so much jewelry. You never come to thank me." Come to think of it, I really hadn't gone to him of my own accord much. "I like them very much. I'll wear them every day from now on." Satisfied, he turned his head. Then Celine stepped forward to dance. She was so beautiful that even I stared, entranced. When I came back to myself, I realized nearly every gaze in the hall was on her, except for two. Lucas's eyes rested on his cup as he poured himself drink after drink. Edward was looking at him, his gaze darkening. "My brother is reserved," I said, squeezing Edward's hand. "He doesn't care for Celine." Though displeased when Emperor Adrian proposed another marriage alliance between our countries, Edward didn't object. So the match was set. But then something even more unexpected happened. Charlotte, the Grand Seer's daughter, the girl I'd seen by the rockery, publicly begged for an imperial marriage. I was surprised. I'd thought her a delicate, timid girl. I hadn't expected her to be so bold and fighting for what she wanted. I glanced at Edward. He seemed very calm. Same difference, he said meaningfully. I understood. I was merely a good luck charm displayed in the Crown Prince's palace. I held the title of Crown Princess without the real power of its mistress. The true lady of the East Palace would not be me. There would surely be others in his harem, whether taken by his choice or shoved in by others. If only I had a child. I thought of the endless bowls of birth control decoction and tasted bitterness on my tongue. Charlotte's wish to enter the Crown Prince's palace was granted by Empress Dowager Margaret, but the wedding date would be chosen by Edward. The whispers behind my back finally faded a little. I began to hate this spring. Seeing my flagging spirits, Ethan Liang visited more often. Yet in recent days he only stood at the door. All his instructions and medicines came through Luna. When I went looking for him, I found him standing where sunlight never reached, in a patch of shadow. "Crown Princess, I won't be able to come again. Take care of yourself," he said very slowly. A sharp unease rose in me. "What are you going to do?" "I won't hold up under deeper investigation." I didn't expect he'd keep digging. "I'll have someone help you flee back to Chiwan. Start preparing." He shook his head. "If I run, what happens to you? I am the Crown Princess." "He won't. Once suspicion takes root, it keeps growing. Don't let a low-born man like me taint your fortune," he said. "Ethan Liang, don't you dare act rashly." "The wind's strong. Please go back inside," he said. He gave me a long look, then turned away. The sunlight stretched his shadow long and thin. I knew, vaguely, what he meant to do. But there was nothing I could do. I could only let that helplessness swallow me whole. A few days later, the news came. Ethan Liang had erred and been captured. I knew he'd done it on purpose. He wanted Edward's investigation to stop. Only this way could he keep my connection to him from being dragged into the light. I could do nothing. I didn't even have the standing to beg Edward to let him die cleanly. I hadn't expected Edward to come to me first. He looked exhausted, staring at me for a long time before speaking. "Do you want to see him?" My gaze flicked to the tray by his hand with a cup of wine. "He did wrong, he must be punished. What is there to see?" Edward's eyes were complicated. He hesitated. "Do you know what he did? Or have you been covering for him?" he finally asked. His eyes were chaotic, a blend of expectation and fear. "If I say I knew, will you imprison me? If I say I didn't, will you go on doubting me in your heart?" I asked. His gaze pinned me. His fingers slid along the cup's rim. "If you go and end him yourself, I will trust you fully from this day on." Poison, then. The wine was poisoned. Why me? My voice shook despite myself. "He coveted my wife." Edward snapped, emotion finally breaking through. "You can kill him outright, but do you have to be so cruel?" Years of feigned gentleness cracked in that moment. Edward laughed, bitterly. "If you won't go, he won't even have a whole corpse left." "Fine, very well." When I walked into the room where Ethan was held, sunlight spilled in behind me for the first time. He instinctively raised a hand to shield his eyes. When he lowered it, his face was ashen but unscarred. He hadn't been tortured, only worn. He smiled faintly. "You're here, Princess Emily." I had words, but they stuck in my throat. His gaze flicked to the cold cup. He actually looked relieved. "Only wine?" Better than I'd expected. Still, I couldn't speak. He soothed me. "Luna is skilled in medicine and versed in arms. She can protect you, Princess." "I'm sorry," I managed at last, heart in chaos. "I'm sorry, Ethan Liang. I lied to you and to Aunt. The letter Father gave me, I'd switched it. The one Aunt burned was my imitation. I'd secretly opened the original. Father had ordered Aunt to find a chance to kill me in secret, then frame Edward. He wanted to use an unloved princess to give Surya a crime, but I didn't want to die. So I forged a new letter, and Aunt helped me instead. I'd meant to bear a legitimate heir, to keep my position from being too fragile. I'd never imagined Ethan would be the one to pay. Calming myself, I told him everything. He listened quietly, then said, with a hint of guilt, "I understand you, Princess. I also lied to you. I took over the birth control decoctions long ago, but I never changed them. Emperor Lucas forbade it. He said when the truth comes out, the Surya royal family will certainly believe you had ulterior motives and might kill the mother and spare the child. He wouldn't allow me to help you." That no longer mattered. "It's my fault I drew you into the Crown Prince's palace. I ruined you," I said. Every word hurt. "If you'd stayed a physician among the commoners, you would never have been exposed so easily." You'd have married and had children and lived half a happy life." He smiled gently. "Even if you hadn't come for me, princess, I would have found my own way into the crown prince's palace to serve you." He paused. When a lowly apprentice is punished and left hungry and freezing, and a little princess brings him a few pastries so he won't starve, that's something he'll remember his whole life. "Princess, I left something for you with Luna." "Princess, I do this willingly." He lifted the cup and drank in one decisive motion. Then he fell. In this vast land, the only person I trusted with all my heart was gone. I was alone. When I stepped out, my legs still trembled. Edward waited a short distance away. "We'll be all right from now on," he said, and pulled me into his arms. He was bending for me. In the past, I would have responded for his sake, but whenever I thought of the scheming, the tests, the premeditated cruelty, anxiety tore at me. So I pushed him away. Red tinged the corners of his eyes. "Because of Ethan Leon, after all? Do you think he's what stands between us?" I asked, spent. It was the plotting, the suspicion. His face froze. "Do you know why I've been so lost since the Lantern Festival?" I stepped back and met his gaze. "I've been thinking, and now I've figured it out. When you brought me from Chiwan, we were ambushed at the border. You could have used the carriage mechanisms to block that sword, but you didn't. You wanted to be wounded yourself." He said nothing, eyes darkening. "That way, even if the assassin killed me, no one could blame you. You were a victim too. A neat performance. You wanted to use a despised princess like me to test whether Chiwan would use it as a pretext for war, didn't you? If I hadn't blocked that sword, you wouldn't have spared me." I drew breath. I'd almost forgotten, but the Lantern Festival brought it back. The two death guards who shielded me, their sword marks. I recognized them. Why send death guards to follow me? Are you afraid I might be hurt now? My father had tried to kill me. So had my husband. Yes, I was greedy for power and security. But did that really warrant my death? I hadn't sinned that deeply. What else was there to say? Edward's composure broke. He reached for me, but his hands closed on air as I stepped back. They finally fell slowly to his sides. "Yes, I'm afraid you'll be hurt. Emily, I told you I made the wrong first move. I regret it. I'll never harbor ill will toward you again, never doubt you again. From now on, we'll live well together, all right? I'm willing to offend the Grand Seer's family. I won't marry Charlotte. As long as I sit the throne, I won't start a war with Chiwan. Let's start over." His face was full of sorrow. I, however, felt utterly empty. I should have said, all right. I'd gained everything I'd wanted, yet felt no joy. How wrong I'd been, believing that once I had the title of Crown Princess, I could rest easy. I finally understood why Celine disliked me so much. She was too noble. She'd seen my smallness at a glance. I should have stayed heartless, but I hadn't. Once you fall in love, how do you reclaim your reason? How do you shed the past and go back to obedient smiles? After that day, I never slept peacefully again. I hated the lifeless creature I was becoming. I thought of Mother Consort Yara in the cold palace. Had she lived like this too? Edward began holding me without speaking, clinging as if afraid I'd vanish. But my health worsened. My eyelids grew heavier each day. They said in whispers that the crown princess was failing. One day when he was away, Luna quietly asked if I wanted to go home. I nodded. Then I felt something tugging at me, trying to drag me into endless darkness. I knew nothing after that. When I opened my eyes again, Lucas was there. His eyes were red, but he said nothing. Later I learned Ethan's gift to Luna was a death-mimicking drug. Emperor Lucas advanced the border troops 30 miles and demanded Surya return my body. Surya was suffering floods and wanted no more trouble. They agreed. They said Edward went mad with rage, but Emperor Adrian knocked him out and locked him in the Crown Prince's palace for days. I touched my slightly rounded belly and realized I'd already been pregnant before returning. Lucas hid me in a temporary palace. All the servants were strangers. Anyone who gossiped about my origins was beaten to death on the spot. He gathered trinkets to cheer me and often walked and talked with me so I wouldn't sink too deep. But he always sighed helplessly. "How are you quieter than I am now?" A few months later, I bore a daughter. Lucas named her Aurora. Because of all the medicine, my body was frail. Added to a gloomy pregnancy and a difficult labor, I was a spent lamp after giving birth. I feigned strength before Lucas, but the worry in his eyes deepened daily. Celine came to see me once. She always stood far away, never crossing the threshold. All I saw was her silhouette. One day, I pretended to sleep and watched her slip in to hold Aurora for a moment. I was so tired. I didn't think I could hold on much longer. The night I left, Lucas held my hand the whole time. His fingers were ice cold. I saw the moisture at the corners of his eyes, but I was too weak to comfort him. As I slipped under, I suddenly wondered if Edward would ever find the jar of plum wine I'd left in the courtyard. Epilogue. Who do you think Emperor Lucas dotes on most? Princess Aurora? Which lady is her mother, anyway? I heard she's the posthumous daughter of the former emperor's Princess Emily. Nonsense. Princess Emily married to Surya and died within a year. The new Surya emperor even posthumously named her Empress Grace. Shh! Do you all have a death wish, gossiping about imperial secrets? Extra Edward's viewpoint. Before going to Chiwan, father made it clear he wanted me to choose a crown princess from among their princesses. Best of all would be Princess Claire. She was the most favored, and the match would help keep peace. But I refused. Relying on a marriage alliance to maintain a flimsy peace was absurd. Two equal powers facing off might look stable, but it was a balance on the tip of a blade. It was time to break it. First, though, I had to test Chiwan's temper. Why not gift them a crude excuse for war? Princess Emily, forgive me. You just happened to be the least favored. When I saw she wasn't at the welcome banquet, I went out to find her myself. I was truly ruthless. Watching that delicate beauty dance under the moon, I hesitated for only a heartbeat before giving her the jade pendant. From that moment, she was my betrothed crown princess, though she might not live to cross the border. The night I presented the marriage proposal to the Emperor of Chiwan, I thought I glimpsed true joy on her face. But it wasn't the joy of finding a good husband. It was the thrill of a plan succeeding. Later, when I probed her, she always spoke of admiring my heroic bearing, yet her eyes were distant and unfocused. Emily Lee, we were quite the pair. When her brother Lucas Lee tried so hard to stop her, I was nervous. Thankfully, she wasn't swayed. I brought her back to Surya. At the border, I'd arranged for death guards to wound me and then kill her. I never expected her to block the sword. The warm spray of her blood over my hand shattered my careful plans. Whatever her motives, I could no longer harden my heart. Whether we would tear our alliance with Chiwan could wait. I had to get her back to the Crown Prince's palace alive. When she woke and clutched my sleeve with tearful eyes, begging only that I never shame her in public, I felt the full weight of her kindness. Hardest to repay is a beauty's favor. I knew she was scheming, but I humored her anyway. Within days, everyone in the East Palace and the capital city knew how I doted on this crown princess. While she was still weak, she barely left the bed. I carried her everywhere. It didn't feel like an act. She was so soft and light, I didn't mind. On the night of the investiture, as our lips met, I suddenly felt a strange sense of rightness. I began to crave seeing true affection in her eyes. But she always stayed just out of reach. At dawn, I would slip away before she woke. I didn't like watching her drink that decoction, but she had to. Surya couldn't have a legitimate heir of mixed blood. The night a thief entered my study, she happened to injure her foot. I didn't say so, but the heavy incense in her hall couldn't fully mask the drift of blood. I wanted to search her rooms many times, but I held back. At first I'd thought she just wanted favor. Now it seemed she had other aims. Emily, were you trying to extract secrets for Chiwan? But you are my wife. I was certain she was connected to that intruder. After investigating, I settled on the new physician, Ethan Leon. Unfortunately, there was no concrete proof. I began to test her, even suggested replacing Ethan. She seemed nervous, but I couldn't bring myself to do more. Slowly, I saw that, though she kept her distance from Ethan, affection lingered in her eyes. Jealousy flared. I wanted Ethan dead, but Emperor Lucas was due to arrive, so I postponed. From the corner tower, I watched her with Lucas. Cold as he was gentle with her. She was always so mild with me, yet almost playful with him. I went mad with envy of her brother. That night in the bath, I probed again, joking about war. She stared down at me and laughed. If I marched on Chiwan, she said, she'd kill herself before me. Was it a joke? I wasn't sure. Normally, it wouldn't have moved me, but with her in my arms, I suddenly thought of negotiating peace instead. Lucas and I had always disliked each other, Yet we spent 2 hours at the board, one game, and our agreement was set. When Lucas left, she gave him a jar of plum wine. Then she fussed at me until she brewed a jar for me too. After that, she grew a little clingier, with the occasional small tantrum. I liked it. But there was still a knife in my heart, Ethan Liang. I knew exactly what he felt. However proper he acted, his eyes could not hide that he loved my wife. I told myself I'd deal with him after the new year. The Lantern Festival on Fan Tower was mind-numbing until I dragged her down to play. She complained her 4-phoenix crown was heavy, just wait until I crowned her empress. She loved the crowds, candied figurines, riddles, lanterns. We had no money, so she pawned her jewels. I let her, as long as she didn't pawn my jade. She bought me a fox mask. Before she could put it on me, the assassins came again. They ruined my night. I had death guards, but I'd ordered them never to leave her side. I never thought she'd recognize the sword marks. My earliest plot, she'd seen right through it. Emily, I would rather you had kept acting. I'd only meant to cheer her up when I took her hunting. But Charlotte's accident struck her even harder. I'd shot Charlotte on purpose. She dared aim an arrow at my crown princess. The public was hard to appease. I still had to marry her. When Ethan blundered into my foul mood, his fate was sealed. Yet I still brooded. Over his desire for my wife, over whether Emily knew his deeds, over whether she had deceived me. I made her kill him with her own hands. Partly to take revenge on him, partly to see if she valued him more than me. She did as I asked, but the look she gave me afterward was pure despair. Emily, couldn't you have gone on acting? Nothing stood between us anymore. Why couldn't you? And then regret came too late. Charlotte's mess, Ethan's death. Their blows fell hardest on her. She withered day by day. When she finally slipped beyond my reach, Emperor Lucas demanded her body. Never. She was my wife. Even dead, she should lie in the imperial mausoleum of Syria. Father knocked me unconscious. By the time I woke, it was done. I drifted for a long time, then finally married Charlotte. I threw her into the most remote courtyard of the Crown Prince's palace and never saw her again. Later, I ascended the throne and posthumously named Emily Empress Grace. One winter, Celine wrote. She said Aurora's eyes were very like mine. Aurora, my little princess. I couldn't take her. I'd hurt her mother once. I couldn't hurt my daughter too. Oh, and I did find the jar of plum wine she left. Extra Lucas's viewpoint, I had a youngest sister, Emily Lee, but she was never happy. All these years, I never dared ask Father why he punished her for what her mother consort Yara had done. No one in the palace fawned over someone out of favor. Even without explicit orders, the servants only had to watch his face to know how to behave. I bribed the imperial kitchens and the imperial wardrobe office to make sure her food and clothes weren't too far below the other princesses. But beyond that, I could do nothing. The scorn and neglect meant for her still came in full. My other sisters always said I favored her. They were... Forget it. After Emily's coming of age, I began seeking husbands for her. I had to act before Father assigned her randomly. She had to leave this deep palace before I could protect her life. The son of Minister Lee was not bad, gentle, educated, not the sort to fawn on the powerful and trample the weak. Naturally, Father rejected my suggestion. Lucas, you are destined for great things. Don't cling to these shallow matters of feeling. Hearing that, I felt both joy and sorrow. Joy that my position as heir was secure. Sorrow that my sister had lost her way out. Life proved fickle. The Crown Prince of Syria skipped over my more dazzling sisters and chose Emily as his crown princess. That fox clearly had his own little plans. I thought Emily would detest a life in another palace, but she insisted on becoming crown princess. Watching her go from one deep chamber to another, I was disappointed. Much later, I realized I, the most favored third prince, had no right to stop my sister, who'd lived in shadows for more than a decade, from choosing her own path. Go, Emily. I'll smooth it as best I can. I worried that Syria's court might learn she'd been cold-shouldered in Chiwan, so once I became crown prince, I flooded the East Palace with gifts, letting everyone see she had a powerful backer. Sometimes Ethan Liang sent reports. Hearing that she was living well eased my mind a little, until he told me Edward had designs on our borders and warned me to be on guard. My heart clenched again. I had to go to Syria. Father ordered me to bring Celine back as my crown princess. Whoever I married, it was all the same. I suspected Edward of ill intent long before I personally saw how he treated my sister. Only then did I sense he might truly love her. Still, I didn't like him, damned fox. We had no affection for each other, yet after one long game of chess, we reached an agreement to keep the border at peace. Should war come, I asked bluntly, would you use Emily as a hostage? I couldn't bear it. Humph. Emily begged me to take Ethan Liang away. I couldn't help asking if she wanted to leave too. A growing sense of unease gnawed at me. I wished I'd been wrong, that she would be happy in Syria. When I heard she'd killed Ethan herself, I knew the disaster had come. Edward, you really couldn't restrain yourself. You could have quietly killed Ethan and she would never have blamed you. But you chose the one method that would show her your lack of trust. Were you stupid? Or scared? News came that Emily's health was failing. Later, I discovered the scandal involving Charlotte had heavily shaken her. My disappointment in Edward deepened. Love her as he might, he couldn't protect her. I worked hard to bring her back. To hell with the future. I hid her in a temporary palace. I'd planned to nurse her back, but after Aurora was born, she looked worse. I named my niece Aurora, Dawn's Light, hoping she'd always shine. Emily died when Aurora was only a month old. She was only 18. I will never return Aurora to Edward. I no longer trust him. Yet as she grew, her eyes became ever more like his. Her sweet father sometimes felt stolen. Do you think Celine sees it? She loves Aurora so much. More than 10 years passed in a blur. I carefully chose her a husband, young Marcus Adrian Wang. He was a little cold, but Aurora loved to chatter. The Prince Su manor would be lively with her there. On her wedding day, I thought I glimpsed Edward. I couldn't be sure. We hadn't met in so many years. But I could still remember clearly the winter long ago, when I knelt in the snow and Princess Emily shoved a pair of knee warmers into my hands. Snuck out of the storeroom just for me.